Welcome back, guys. This is the Black Diamond Podcast, and we got a great episode today on how you can get started in real estate and investing. And I'm joined with a special guest today. So, for that, let's get into it. All right, welcome back, guys. Before we get started on the episode, I just want to say I'm trying to reach the goal of 1,000 subscribers. So if you guys can pause the video, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment. And today's episode is going to be focused on real estate and how you can get started in real estate today. So I'm joined with a special guest, Luke Andrews. Luke, how are you? How you doing?
Will, man, I'm doing great. I'm super excited to be here, brother.
Okay. So yeah, we got a great episode on real estate. Luke, I did my research on you. I know a little bit about you. Why don't you give the people out there a simple introduction, tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm own a couple of real estate companies here in Louisville, Kentucky. I do help people buy and sell real estate. I manage a team of 21 agents. And then I also have a real estate investment company as well. So we've got some buy and holds, some, kind of small apartment buildings, some fix and flips, Airbnbs, things like that. But actually, I come from a corporate background. So, about 7 years ago, I was in strategic marketing and data analytics, running a team for a Fortune 100 company, doing some pharmaceutical marketing, and just wasn't fulfilled in my life. I wasn't, doing the things that, I felt like I was put on this earth to do. And, I moved into the entrepreneurial world, started the real estate companies, and then, it hasn't been easy by any means, but I think when you're on the path that you're supposed to be on and you're passionate about what you're doing, it makes the losses a little easier to take.
I mean, that's a good story. So you came from a corporate background. How did you know you wanted to make that transition into becoming an entrepreneur focusing on real estate?
Well, and I apologize. I think the Amazon man just came. My dog's barking in the background. So for me, it was, I always knew that I had that entrepreneurial itch. But my wife was a real estate agent at the time. And I'm commuting back and forth from downtown to the suburbs every day. And then she tells me one day, she's like, if you were licensed just part-time, she was like, you could stop and show houses for me on the way home from work. So she wouldn't have to go out during rush hour. And so I was like, I'm always looking for a new challenge. I love the education piece. So I went through, it's about 90 hours of classroom work and then taking a test. I got licensed and started just kind of helping her out a little bit part-time. And man, I fell in love immediately. And it was all about how can I do more of this?
Yeah.
And then so we immediately put together a 24-month transition plan of how can I transition out of my corporate role into us being both, 1099 entrepreneurs running our own business, giving up the salary, the bonuses, the 401ks, the health insurance, all of those things. And so we created that 24-month plan and said, we've got certain milestones that we have to hit. And we were actually able to do it in about 8.5 months.
Wow.
So it was just like crazy. And then we had a transition plan set up, another 24 months of once we were in it full time, what does that first 24 months look like?
Yeah.
And obviously I had a little bit of a cheat sheet there, her being in the business already. So I could kind of see the inner workings of it. I didn't go into it blind. And that's part of why we wanted to create that transition plan. But it helped me understand and see that end goal. Because what I tell people is they're transitioning in, out of a very steady, stable corporate job into doing their own thing. The first 6 months, really easy. Like it's like super simple. Like even when you're just running on adrenaline, right? It's all exciting. It's new. Even when you're getting kicked in the teeth, you're smiling, you're taking it because it's like, man, I'm out here, I'm doing it. Months 7 through 12, 7 through 13 get pretty tough. And, kind of that second year, that months 12 and 13 up to 24 are just, just get damn hard. And
Yeah.
so it's a matter of having that end goal in mind, seeing those milestones that you can hit. Because I'm a firm believer in momentum and finding little wins along the way, and then just knowing, hey, here's what we've got. I've just got to persevere. I have to get through to this point, and then I know my success is virtually guaranteed beyond that. It doesn't mean that the work stops, and it doesn't mean that it gets easy, but it does get easier. And then knowing if I can make it through that first 2 years, that I can make it through anything.
So what were some of the top things you found you needed to make that transition into, becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, one, I needed to make sure that I had a very set routine and schedule,
Mhm.
because I'm not naturally a very organized person. And so I have to be uber organized and uber disciplined in the things that I do, because it's not in my nature. And I don't think it's in very many people's nature. Even like if you've ever read David Goggins' book, the first one that he had, Can't Hurt Me, the dude seems like just a disciplined machine. But if you listen to the audiobook, he does some interviews throughout the process, and they ask him towards the end, they're like, do you ever have days where you don't feel like running? And he said, every day. He said, every single day, he spends 20 to 30 minutes just staring at his running shoes, trying to find every excuse he can to not go out and do what he needs to do. But he does it anyway. And I think that's kind of the definition of discipline there, is doing it even when you don't feel like it. Um, and so I had to have those rules in place, and a big part of that was time management, especially because I was transitioning out of a full-time corporate role. So I had to make sure that I covered both. Plus, I had 2 little kids at home. I'm trying to be a husband, a dad, an entrepreneur, and an employee all at the same time, while also being a leader and a manager at the corporate job that I was working. And so it felt like I was being pulled in all kinds of different directions, but I had to have a very disciplined and structured routine, and that made it easier. And then the second piece of it was, again, just having those milestones and those little wins along the way,
Mhm.
to know that it wasn't so far in the future, and that every time I hit one, every time I checked one off, it gives you that little boost of dopamine, that boost of adrenaline. But it
Yeah, a little
also
boost
helps
of
you know that you're on
confidence.
the right path.
Yep. Nice. Um, so you brought up a great point, discipline. I think the definition of discipline is, doing something when you know that you don't want to do it, but you have to do it to achieve your goals.
Yeah.
So that's good that you brought that up. Um, so for all the people out there who are in your situation, or were in your situation where you're working 9 to 5, you possibly have kids at home, or maybe you don't, what can they do to get their feet into real estate?
So from a real estate perspective, I think you need to have a clear vision of what you're looking for.
Hmm.
Um, and you know that's going to help drive the passion, because when you've got that passion, it makes everything just a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Like I said, it makes that first 6 months super easy. But if they're looking to move into real estate, especially if they're looking to move into real estate investing, again, it goes back to that discipline, and it goes back to those rules. I wrote a book not long ago all about the mistakes that I made early on in the investment journey, and the mistakes that I see as I'm, working in an agent capacity, helping
Hmm.
new investors, because that's a big part of my business. It's something I'm super passionate about, is helping people get into real estate investing. And so I'm trying to normalize this, showing what our mistakes are. Because, if you're watching Instagram and TikTok and all these places, everybody just wants to show you the highlight reel. Nobody wants to show you about the difficult times that they had going through, the mistakes that they made. They just want to show you those wins.
Right.
They've got 30 seconds, and they want to show off. Look at me, look at me, look what I've done. Which I don't have any issue with at all. I think we need to be celebrating our successes, but we also need to be conscious of our mistakes and sharing in those mistakes too. Because if I can take somebody's learning curve and I can shorten it and flatten it just a little bit for them, that can mean the difference between them staying in business and doing something that they love and they're passionate about, versus going back to the safety and security of that corporate 9 to 5.
Yeah.
What can I do to help them along that path? And one of those things is having those clear set of rules to know that when you come across a potential investment, you don't have to talk yourself into it or out of it. It either fits in your rule books or it doesn't. Now, as you get a little more seasoned and you do it a little bit more, you can kind of expand that out a little bit, and then you can predict the future a little bit better. You get, what we call that crystal ball. But in the beginning, you need to have a very disciplined set of rules and say, okay, these are the types of investments that I'm looking for. They fit into this box. They check this box. And I always say err a little bit on the side of caution with those. Be a little more conservative with those estimates, because I can tell you, if you're looking for a 10 or a 12% ROI, and that's kind of how it pencils on the front side, expenses are always going to come up that you don't anticipate. So you're probably going to end up more in that 6 to 8 range. So if I start at 10 or 12 and I end up at 6 to 8, I'm doing pretty good. I'm pretty happy and excited about that. But if I start at 6 or 8 and I end up at 1 or 2 or maybe -1, I'm not so happy about that. So I've got to make sure that everything kind of fits into that box that I'm looking for, especially in the beginning when I don't know what I don't know.
I think a lot of times people come into real estate investing with the mindset that they are going to make those big ROIs, those 10 to 12% on their, $100,000 down payment or investment that they put into it. And realistically, you might actually lose money in the beginning, but in the end, it's a mistake that you can use to make sure that you don't make again in the future, if that makes more sense.
Oh, 100%. You are exactly right, Will. And it's one of those things too that you got to make sure that you're limiting that downside, so that even if
Right.
it is a loss and you end up taking a little bit of a hit on it, but you can still live to keep on playing. You don't want it to
Right.
be so devastating that it knocks you out of the game completely.
So speaking on that, what are some mistakes you see people make the most getting started with the real estate investing?
Sure. Two of the big ones that I see revolve around partnerships.
Mm,
Number one is people who refuse to take on a partner. There are some that are like, yeah, I don't want a partner because I don't want to split my profits. I mean, if I think I'm going to end up at 6%, I don't want to cut it in half and be at 3. That's not really worth it
right.
to me. But I'll tell you, I don't mind that at all, because with a partner, if I'm a 50-50 partner, yeah, I may be splitting the profits 50-50, but I'm also splitting the risk 50-50. And if it's the right partner, I'm splitting the work 50-50. And if we're doing it the right way, it means that we can actually pool our money together and go out and buy 2 properties, um,
Right.
so that it ultimately ends up being the same. However, with appreciation rates and economies of scale and everything else, our portfolio is going to be able to grow significantly faster. So I always tell people, don't discount taking on a partner in the beginning just because you don't want to split those profits. Now, the counter to that, my next mistake in the book, and I even make a disclaimer in the beginning, like, hey, some of these are going to sound a little contradictory, but the next one is taking on the wrong partner for the wrong reasons.
Hmm.
Never take on a partner strictly for money. You want to look at what are some strategic alliances that we have, and maybe it is splitting the workload. Um, what I always tell people when choosing a partner is you want to choose your mirror, not your twin. And what I mean by that is when you're choosing your twin, it's someone that is exactly like you. There's no real stake or no real benefit other than money. But if you're choosing your mirror, on the surface, we're going to look the same. We're going to have the same goals, visions, and values that makes us good partners. But the mirror piece of it is we're kind of opposite in our strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
So, like for me and my business partner that I've got from an investment standpoint, I'm really good on the number side and kind of having all of that dialed in, and I can analyze projects and ROIs very quickly. But I'm really, really weak on the design and the creative vision and those types of things, where he is really, really strong. Um, and because of some of those differences, sometimes I have a little more of a challenge dealing with the tenants, talking to them. Because I speak just very plainly, clearly, and it's very much A, B, C, D points. And tenants don't necessarily like that. They need somebody who's a little more on their level. Consequently, I'm a lot better at dealing with the contractors and the trades, the painters, the plumbers, the HVAC, all of those. Because again, I go very linearly. I don't know if that's a word or not, but you know what I'm saying there.
Yeah.
And so we've got the same goals, visions, and values, but we've got opposite strengths. And so we're able to go significantly further, and even potentially faster, because we're there working together and kind of spreading that out.
Yeah. No, I agree with what you say 100%. I think finding someone who fills in your gaps where you're not necessarily as strong, your weaknesses,
Mhm.
someone who can compliment you and not just mirror you, what you said. So that's good. How do you recommend someone finding that partner? Because a lot of times people don't have the capital to get into real estate investing, and they partner up with one or two other people just for the capital reasons. And then those people necessarily may not have the experience or the background in real estate, and this project ends up becoming a failure. How do people avoid that, and where do they go to find the right partner for a business like this?
Well, I think it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of
Yeah.
talking to a lot of people, and really trying to get down and figure out, okay, where are we? Where can we find these synergies? I'll tell you a quick story about how I got into real estate investing, which I think will answer your question very well, and then again
Mhm.
show you some of the mistakes that I made, but also some areas where we were able to pick up some wins. So my business partner and I, we were partners before we had properties. And so we had decided, we each kind of had one of our own, like basically the first house that we ever lived in, we had just kept it as rentals. But
Mhm.
other than that, we had zero experience, but we knew it was something that we wanted to get into. It was this area of town that we knew was up and coming, but there were still some really good opportunities there. And so you could pick up kind of an old shotgun house that needed a decent amount of work for roughly 20 grand. And so our plan was we were going to pay cash, do a lot of the work ourselves, rent it, refi, kind of do that BRRR method, and then just gradually grow from there. Well, luck, fate, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, my business partner is having dinner with his girlfriend's parents, and they have some friends over. And so he's telling them a little bit about what he does and about what he's passionate about with the real estate investing. And they're like, well, interestingly enough, we're real estate investors and we're looking to sell our portfolio and retire and move out of state. So would you be interested in buying it? 13 properties.
Wow.
And he calls me, I'm looking at this deal, and man, it is a good deal. Like I can tell this deal is fantastic. The problem is we don't have the money, the resources. We have nothing. We have no business with 13 doors coming into this thing.
Mhm.
And so we're like, hey, can we buy one or two? And they're like, no, you got to take the whole thing or you got to take nothing. So we knew it was a good deal. We knew we didn't have the money. And so we just started asking people that we knew who were in real estate investing, like, hey, what would you do? How did you get started? And just gathering all of this information. Well, we finally come to one of this group of two guys who they had over 100 doors at the time together. And they were like, well, if it were us, we'd find partners like us and partner up to be able to, just kind of split this off. And so we thought, fantastic. I mean, this is great. This gives us an opportunity to come in, and almost be like an apprentice, kind of learning
Mhm.
from these guys. Um, so they introduced us to lenders and financing and all of these other things. Now, the next roadblock that we run into is we still don't even have enough money for 50% of the down payment that we have to come up with.
Mm.
And again, it's like these guys, they could go off and they could do this on their own, but knew it was a good deal, knew I needed to be a part of it. So thinking outside the box, what I did was I said, okay, we're going to have to hire a property manager for these. Why don't you let me and my buddy, we'll manage the properties for free on a schedule that says, you know, it, we'll put up what we can. The other two guys will put up what we're missing. We're going to stay 50-50 partners, and we will manage these properties for free until we have our difference paid off. And we knew it was going to take us about 18 months or so. So what this did a couple of things for us. One, it just got us in the game on a really good deal. But two,
Right.
forcing us to go out and manage these properties, it was trial by fire. I mean, it was just like crazy trying to get all this stuff figured out. But we learned so much throughout that process, and we were actually able to raise the rents enough and get everything turned over that, one, we took that 18-month payoff schedule, knocked it down to 10. So we get that paid off in
Whoa.
10. And we raised the rents so much that we were able to refinance this package, pull all of our money back out, and then found another package of 14 that we rolled that into. So all of a sudden, our portfolio goes from 13 to 27. It
Wow.
nearly, it doubles in a year.
That's in less than a year because
Yeah,
you paid it off in 10 months.
exactly. And so now, one, it shows that when you find a good deal, you find a way to do it, right? And you got to
Yeah.
sometimes think outside the box for these things. But I will tell you, is these other two partners that we picked up at the end of the day, not bad dudes at all. We just didn't necessarily share the same goals, visions, and values, and so we ultimately ended up parting ways down the road,
Hmm.
because we didn't ask enough questions on the front side. It was just strictly a, "Hey, you can get us in this deal. You can show us the ropes. Great," and it was good. It was what we needed at the time and in the moment.
Hmm.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, it didn't really work out for us. Uh, but so we went through, and we decided we were just going to sell everything, and we were just going to part ways at a certain point. But again, we learned so much throughout that process, um, that we've been able to continue growing on our own on the outside
Right.
and buying all kinds of different types of properties. So again, fix and flips to small apartment buildings to single family homes, and now we're venturing into Airbnbs and the short term rentals. And it was just a matter, though, of having to persevere and think outside the box on the front end.
In that situation, the experience was more valuable than the actual assets itself.
It was way more valuable than the cash, although the cash is 100% necessary in these businesses in order to be able to keep rolling and going. So
So you mentioned the BRRR method. I just want, can you just explain that a little bit more for the people who might not know?
sure. So it's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. So it's like
Mm.
basically you buy property, you do the rehab on it, and then you refinance it once you've got it done, and you've obviously increased the value at that point, so you're able to kind of pull some of your cash back, and then you find a tenant for it, and then you just go through, and then you just repeat that process with properties all over the place. It's a method that many people use, and it was something that we did on the front side, and it helped us quite a bit.
Now, there's a lot of discussion between doing that and potentially buying an apartment, rehabbing, and then renting it out and just collecting that passive income in your portfolio. What do you
Well, and
think
so
is
we did that. That is
Mhm.
part. So through the rental there, and then we just refinanced it, and we held on to it for long term rentals. So we would keep them.
Oh, so you keep, so it's not like a fix and flip.
No, it wasn't a fix and flip on the BRRRR method. We would keep them. We did a fix and flip or two, but for the most part, we were buying. We would do a quick rehab. We'd get a tenant in there, and then we would do a refinance so that we could pull a lot of our cash back out.
Mhm.
And then we just repeated that with other properties. But yes, we would hold on to them and keep those tenants in there, because at the end of the day, I'd rather have cash flow. They call it streams of money versus piles of money,
Mhm.
uh, and those it kind of feeds the ego to look in the bank and see those piles of money, but it feeds the family, seeing those streams of money
Streams of
down,
income, yeah.
just constantly
So
every single month, and that's how people end up being able to quit their traditional jobs by just having so
Right.
much of those streams of income. They just replace their current salary.
Okay. So how did you come about finding that first property that was perfect for the BRRRR method? Because there's
Mhm.
there's a lot of multifamily units and apartment units, but sometimes they don't work out in terms of ROI. So how did you find this perfect house or unit?
It took a lot of looking. And
Mhm.
you're right. The multifamilies right now, they're so popular, and they've been, there's a lot of these really popular real estate investing podcasts that are out there, that I'm sure many of your listeners are probably listening to as well. And they've pitched that kind of small multifamily, like the 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 plex properties. Um, that the prices have just gone through the roof, and it's very, very
Yep.
difficult to make a good ROI on them. So for us, it was about having a strict set of rules on the front side and doing a whole lot of looking. So I always recommend to everybody is kind of building out a team of people.
Mhm.
Um, so you've got a trusted real estate professional, which fortunately in my case it was me because I was licensed. But having a real estate agent who is out there looking for you, and actually finding an agent who invests themselves, I think is really beneficial. A lot of I was scared to death the first time I started working with investors to tell them that I was an investor myself, because
Mhm.
I was afraid that they were going to say, "Well, why the hell would I want to work with you? You're just going to buy all the good stuff, and I'm just going to get everything that's left over." We're competition. And I said, when I finally got up the courage to say, "You're exactly right. The very best things that come my way, I am going to buy." Um, Now, the thing is I can't buy everything. I don't have unlimited funds. I can't buy everything. So yes, the A pluses I'm going to take, but some of the A's, the A minuses, I'm going to funnel right down to you, because the majority of these properties never actually hit the market. And so the only way you're going to know about them is because they're funneling through me. And they're funneling through me is because people know that I've bought in the past. In addition, you'll also know that because I do this for myself, that when I tell you, here's what I think the ROI is going to be, that you can trust that number. So I always tell people, look for an agent who is an investor themselves so that they know what they're talking about. Don't be afraid of them being your competition. But also finding good painters, electricians, HVAC, people like that, because
Contractors.
exactly, they see a lot of these deals before they actually hit the market as well. So they can kind of
Yeah.
help funnel those to you. And then when you actually do buy one, you've got a stable of people who are right there ready to roll to help you on that rehab process. Finding good attorneys, financial advisors, CPAs, especially finding estate attorneys, because they see a lot of these properties that families are looking to unload because, you know, mom or dad just passed away,
Mhm.
and they need to sell this property that's sitting there vacant. These are good opportunities for you. So by having these relationships and kind of building this team together on the front side really helps in the identification process.
So do you think people should build the team first before actually looking, start really looking into buying a property? Should they go ahead and start finding out which contractors are best, which real estate agent they want to work with, which lawyers they need, the accountants? Should they build all of that out first?
I think so. Yes.
Mhm.
I don't think that it needs to be 100% fully vetted before you're out there looking. But I think starting that process, because you don't want to be doing it in arrears. You don't want to have the
Right.
property under contract and then trying to build that team on the backside. I think if nothing else, at least kind of run them concurrently, so you're doing them right there at the same time. But yes, having that team in place can be really beneficial. And for your agent as well, I also tell people, either look for things that aren't currently on the market, or look for things that have been sitting on the market for 40, 50, 60, 70 days, where the seller might be getting a little bit desperate. Things that everyone else has kind of forgotten about. The stuff that's
Mhm.
brand new to the market, it's really, really tough to get a deal on. So you either need to find it before it hits the market, or you need to find it once it's been on for a little while. Those are my general rules of thumb. And what I'm teaching investors is they're coming through and trying to help them get up and running.
Nice. So for the average man like myself and all the average other guys out there, say we're in our mid 20s, 25 to 28, going on to our 30s, and we want to get started into real estate. How much, and we have our team. Say, for example, we have our team, we have our agent, we have our contractors ready to go. How much do you think we need to save to really thrive in real estate investing? How much would we need to save up for like a down
Cool.
payment, rehab fixtures, things like that?
I think if you're willing to take on a partner and you're willing to be a
Mhm.
little creative with it, I mean, I think you could probably start with $10,000 to $15,000. And I say that because here's the big pushback I get.
Mhm.
And I actually got this because I sent out an email not long ago, and I had a couple of agents from California reach out and say, you know what, this is great, but this doesn't work in my market. You
Right.
can't buy this stuff in my market. You can't get these returns in my market, and so I don't know what kind of crap you're spilling, but don't send it out here to the West Coast. Keep it over there in the Southeast. Well, with the digital age that we're in right now, just because you live in California doesn't mean that you can't invest in the Southeast. Just because you live in Hawaii doesn't mean
Very
that you can't
true.
invest in the Southeast. Just because you live, I've got, I got clients living in Germany that are investing around here.
Wow.
Okay. And
Yeah.
I'm even starting to expand mine out because my market is getting a little oversaturated. And
Mhm.
so don't be afraid. I mean, where you can go find, I can tell you 5 years ago, there was this pocket of kind of three neighborhoods. They were all just kind of, built in the 40s and 50s, all kind of 2 bed, 1 bath, 3 bed, 1 bath, basically just like small little boxes, right? 900 to 1100 square feet. You could pick these things up for between 55 and $68,000, and they were
Wow.
renting for between 650 and 800 a month. I
Mhm.
mean, it was just like, give me all of those that you can. Now that has since changed in the last 5 years. Those houses are now 100 to 125 and renting for 900 to 1,050. So the numbers aren't quite as good. They're still there, but there are other places, within a 3 to 4 hour drive of here that are that works just fine. Um,
Mm.
One, you can find good solid property managers in most markets, but even if you can't, I mean, here's the thing. Even if a house is across town and somebody has a leaky toilet, chances are I'm not going to be the one that goes and fixes it anyway. I'm still calling a
Right.
plumber. I'm still going to Google to find one, or calling my trusted real estate professional and be like, "Hey, who's a good plumber there in your market?" And I can do that from anywhere. You know, I can Google a plumber from anywhere. I can call a plumber from anywhere, and I can arrange access to be able to get them in. If somebody wants to pay their rent, you know what? They can Venmo, they can PayPal, they can Cash App, they can do all of these things. You don't have to be physically right there. Yeah, is it great? And that's something that people love about real estate is, you can go and touch it. You can physically go put your hands on it. You can ride over there after dinner to go look at it. Yeah, that's fantastic. But if it cash flows and makes money, just because it's not right there in their backyard doesn't mean that's no different than my mutual funds at Schwab, right?
Right.
I can't physically go and look at those either. It's all just numbers on a spreadsheet.
So have you ever saw a property that you like that was possibly in another state, and without even going there to look at it, you were like, this is what I want. This is what I want to rehab, and I'm going to get started on this.
Yeah, yes and no. I tell people that if you're going to be investing in another state, you at least need to have one. You absolutely need to have that team in place because you got to have somebody trusted that can go take a look at it and who knows what they're talking
Mhm.
about. But two, I say at least invest in a trip to just go drive the town, go drive target
Okay.
neighborhoods, just so you get a feel for it. So, like, I'll tell you, I have a lot of investors from out of town who they go to this little neighborhood that I was just telling you about, where it was, the kind of that pocket there, and they're driving through, and they're like, "Man, this is I I would never live here. I wouldn't
Right.
I wouldn't want to tell my friends that I own these properties." And I said, one, you don't have to live here. I'm not asking you to live here. This is an investment for you. Crime rates are moderate, which what helps with the price. Crime rates are not overly high. They're also not the lowest of the low, but that helps with, you're still getting good quality tenants. You're still getting high rents. And I understand that you wouldn't want to tell your friends that you own this property. Because I did. I had someone that came in and said, I couldn't tell my friends that I own this. And I say, you may not think this house is sexy, but to me, cash flow is sexy. That's
Right.
the important piece. That's what we're looking for here. We're buying cash flow that is connected to an asset that is only increasing in value. And you may not love it. And if that's the case, that's the case. And that's perfectly okay. But at least go drive around so you've got a feel for what those neighborhoods look like.
Right.
You get a feel for, is there a crime map where you can go take a look? And just research some historic rents, utilizing tools like Zillow and things like that. But I think if you're going to invest $10,000 to $15,000 in a down payment, or even, if that's just half your down payment, it's worth, spending $500-700, especially if you think you're going to buy multiple, on a quick plane ride, night in a hotel room, and a rental car, just kind of driving around and coming back just to say, hey, how do I really feel about this place?
Yeah. So that 10 to 15,000, that's with a partner, of course.
Generally, yes. I mean, unless you can find a market where you can find a really good rental for, 50 grand. But I think if you can find a partner, like I said, if you've got similar goals, visions, and values, you find a spot that's, $80,000-90,000, something that's going to rent for, $750 to $900 a month. There are still many markets, especially in the Southeast, where you can do that. I think those are great opportunities. But when you think about a 20% down payment, and then just having a little bit in reserves in case it takes a month or two to get the thing rented, or it needs a little bit of rehab on the front side, those are all things to keep in mind.
So I'm on the East Coast, and we're here in New York, right? And you probably already know, but the housing prices are, they've skyrocketed in New York. So it's pretty crazy. What do you say to the person who wants to do it on his own? And then the neighborhoods in New York City are so different and they're so expensive that he has to look in another state.
I say don't be afraid to do that. I mean, there's nothing that says that you have to be close by this thing. I mean, there were properties that I owned because we had property managers taking care of them. Once our portfolio got large enough that they were just literally across town, a 25 to 30-minute drive, and I wouldn't see them for a year just because I didn't happen to be right there by it. It wasn't necessary for me to do that. I had a team in place. Now, I will tell people, if you watch Instagram, TikTok, and listen to some of these podcasts, they'll tell you, oh, hey, just go buy a property, get a property manager, and it's just mailbox money. That is not the case. I never like to set that expectation. Even with a property manager, you're still going to have to be, you still need some oversight just to make sure that they're not kind of robbing you on the backside. I did have that happen. A property manager stole quite a bit from us just with some over improvements that weren't necessary. You're still going to have to approve a lot of expenses. So you either have to have complete trust and give them autonomy to go out without approving and run the risk of getting taken advantage of on the backside, or you're approving quite a bit. So it's work that can be done from anywhere, but there is still work involved. It's not just strictly, hey, I turned it over to a property manager and then I just get checks every month and everything's great. It's not as simple as they make it out to be.
At what point did you start looking into a property management group?
So we probably would have at the initial 13 that we purchased, because it's a lot. Just me and one other guy trying to manage these, especially because some of them had some deferred maintenance to them. So there were more calls that would come in. But the reason that we didn't is because we needed to make up that delta of what we couldn't bring to the table on the front side. But I typically say once you've got more than 5 or 6, you probably want to at least consider having a property manager that's there.
Yeah.
Once they're up and running and you get the tenants in there, it's usually pretty easy and pretty simple. But it's also very easy for tenants to take advantage of an individual as opposed to a property manager. It's just like rules are hard and fast. It's like I've got a big heart, and if somebody's like, "Hey, I'm late on the rent this month," okay, don't worry about it. We'll be okay. No late fees. Don't just do what you need to do. And then you've been nice and kind till all of a sudden they're 2-3 months behind, and now it's like, okay, what are we supposed to do at this point? I have to completely reverse course, and now I'm looking at taking severe action. Whereas if I just would have had hard and fast rules on the front side, we could have avoided this altogether. A property manager is very, very good at that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this whole process, becoming an entrepreneur, sounds like it requires a lot of networking. It requires a lot of speaking with different people, being open. What other traits do you think people need to be successful in this type of environment?
Be inquisitive, ask a lot of questions, and don't be afraid to just reach out to people. I mean, you'd be surprised how many of these so-called influencers they just love talking real estate, right? They love talking to people about what they do and how they can help. So don't be afraid to go out and ask a lot of questions, or even finding people locally in your hometown who are doing it well, who have a business that you would like to emulate. Go reach out to them.
Yeah.
Worst they can say is no, or they just don't respond at all. Okay, great, fine. But there are a lot who they've got a soft spot for people starting out because they were once in that place. Every now and then you'll run into the jerks and let them go, write them off, and just you keep that in the back of your mind, because you're going to come across them, because you're going to be successful enough someday that you're going to come across them again, and then you're going to eat their lunch.
Yep. I think that also comes with your ego, understanding that you have to kind of let your ego go and be open to pursuing a lot of people, even though you're going to get rejected. You're going to have that one person who's going to say yes to you. So
yeah, well, and letting go of your ego when you're actually talking to them, and letting them just provide you with answers. Don't try to guess what their response is going to be or talk over them. You're a sponge. Like you're there just taking pages and pages of notes, and don't forget to follow up with them after to say, hey, I really appreciate that you took the time and you told me to try A, B, and C, and I was able to go ahead and implement A and B here pretty quickly, and it was successful. It worked by blank, and then kind of go through. The people who are giving you their time, they want to know that it wasn't for nothing, right? They want to know that you were listening and that you actually went out and you took action. And then they like to hear, there's a little bit of an ego stroke coming back, like, hey, you did what I said and it worked. It makes me feel good as well.
Nice. Have you helped a lot of people become an entrepreneur or go into real estate?
Yeah. And so it's from the real estate agent perspective, because I lead a team, I've helped a lot of people kind of get up and running through that world. But from an investment world, I've taken on and helped a lot of first-time investors, and to be able to scale that more, which is why I kind of went through and wrote that first book that I wrote. Or it was actually the third book that I wrote, but all about from a real estate perspective. And somebody asked me, because I'd written a couple of books and they were selling on Amazon and just kind of little revenue streams that I had. And they were like, man, if you're really passionate about helping people, you put your money where your mouth is and just give it away for free. And so that's what I did. I just made it an ebook. Anybody that wants it, they can go to 10investormistakes.com, and that's the number 10. So 10investormistakes.com. They can go download that book 100% for free. It talks about just kind of my journey, my story about how I got started, but the 10 mistakes that I was making and that are most common that I see new investors make as they're getting in, because I helped several on an annual basis kind of get started here in my local market.
Nice. Yeah, guys, check out that book. I hope you guys are enjoying the wisdom and knowledge that we're giving you all. There's a lot of great information that's been talked about on this episode. But going back to that first time homeowner or investor, we should say, there's a lot of different methods to get started with investing. There's wholesaling, the fix and flips, the BRRR method. Which method do you recommend the most to your first time investors?
I recommend the BRRR method. The fix and
Hmm.
flip is really, really challenging right now, especially with the cost of materials, cost of labor. And if you don't really know what you're doing, you can lose yourself in a hurry. And we actually did on our first fix and flip. Um, it, Costs and everything, costs and timelines got so out of control that we actually ended up holding it for 2 years as a rental, because
Wow.
we were going to take such a huge loss if we sold.
Yeah.
But we were in a spot to where we could rent it, we could break even on a monthly basis, and then spent 2 years just kind of letting it appreciate to where we could finally sell and make some money.
Hmm.
Uh, the wholesaling method, it's not bad and it can be beneficial. It's a lot harder than people will make it out to be, but I can tell you that there are a lot of states that are cracking down on it. So I can tell you, Kentucky actually just passed a law that now wholesalers have to have a real estate license. So they have to go through the courses, and like this has all been passed within the last couple of weeks. And so we're still trying to
Uh,
kind of dig in and see what it looks like. But there are also, so there are laws here that kind of prevent us as agents from getting too good of a deal on properties,
mhm.
because we're deemed to know more than the average consumer. So we can't get quote too good of a deal. So I'm wondering how that's going to affect some of the wholesalers that we have here and how the laws are going to impact them. And then, like I said, I know that they're now going to have to go through the 90 plus hours of courses, be able to pass the tests. And um, we don't really know how that's all going to shake out, but more and more states are adopting that. So it's something that if people are currently wholesaling or considering wholesaling, they need to keep that in mind and take a look at the states where they're working in to see, make sure they're not violating any laws.
And for wholesaling, for people who don't know, is when someone goes out and finds a property and basically does the research on what type of ROI this is going to bring them, the down payment, things like that. And they bring that deal to someone else and they get a small percentage of what that deal would have been. So for example, it was like maybe like 10 to 20,000 on the contract, and they'll just like sign it over to someone else, to another investor most times.
So typically what we see the wholesalers here is they're out doing what we call, just for lack of a better term, just kind of bird dogging deals.
Hmm.
So I know a lot of the wholesalers, they'll just go knock on somebody's door, especially if they see like the grass is overgrown or roof is in bad shape, landscaping's bad, maybe some deferred maintenance to where it looks like they can't really take care of the property anymore, either physically or financially, and they may be looking to sell. And so they'll basically go through and they'll say, okay, they'll cut a deal with the seller and say, "Hey, I'm willing to buy this house for $100,000."
Hmm.
Okay, great. So they get that deal in place with the seller. Now they're going out and they're shopping this contract to all kinds of investors and people that are out there. And it's like, okay, well, I'll sell you this house for 120. And
Right.
so if they can find somebody to buy that house for 120, then they get to keep that, whatever that spread is. Maybe they find somebody for 105. Maybe they can only find somebody for 98, and then they either take a loss, or most of their contracts are written in such a way to where they can get out if they can't find a buyer for it.
Right.
But that's really what they do, is they're just working on the spread. And so they're trying to figure out how big they can make those spreads. And I've seen them as low as 15 to 1800 bucks. I've seen them as high as, 25, $30,000. It really just kind of depends. And the wholesaler, most of them are coming in without actually having any money to begin with, because they're not they have no intention of ever buying this property. They're just looking to sell the contract.
Right. Okay.
And it can be beneficial. I know some wholesalers that have made really good livings off of it. I don't know how the new laws are gonna shake out and how they're gonna affect them.
Yeah, that was something new that, you brought to my attention. I didn't know there was new laws going in place about that, but that's
Yeah,
interesting to
it's
know.
all state by state, and so that's why I tell wholesalers, check the state where you're working in.
Yeah.
Just make sure that everything's still good, because it Kentucky is normally way behind the curve in terms of passing new laws on things. So I figured if it's here, that it's probably already hit several other areas across the country.
Yeah. Well, do your research before you get into real estate. That's always important. Make sure you know what you're getting into. Don't just jump into anything without doing your homework. So this is a mental health improvement podcast. So I want to get your thoughts on how, in what other ways men can improve themselves or level up.
Oh, you froze on me. You still there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. You're back. You were asking just how men can level up.
Yep. Outside of real estate.
Yeah, I mean, one, always finding something where you can improve yourself. I mean, just, whether it's reading, podcasts, YouTube video, whatever it is, finding areas where you can improve yourself mentally, but also finding areas where you can improve yourself physically. I'm a
Right.
firm believer that, you don't have to be on the cover of Men's Health here, but keeping yourself in decent physical shape allows, at least I found, my mind works better. So I'm able to think more clearly. I can analyze deals better. But it's also, when I feel like I look good, I'm more confident. And so I'm approaching deals differently. I'm negotiating differently. I'm doing all of these things differently because I feel good about myself physically. So I'm just naturally more confident going in. And that's been a big key for me. So, just trying to find ways of how can I stay in better physical shape, and then also continuously improving and learning from a mental perspective.
That's true. When you feel good and you smell good, you feel good, you look good, your confidence will go up, and then that will start to affect every aspect of your life. So that's a good tip right there. But Luke, it's been great speaking to you. Where can the people find you? How can they get in contact with you?
Sure. So I'm most active on LinkedIn. They can come find me there, and you can access all that stuff, and even you can get to the book just directly from my website, lukeandrews.us, or go to 10investormistakes.com. That's the number 10 investormistakes.com. Download that book 100% for free. So
nice. And we will have all that information in the description below. Once again, thank you, Luke, for coming on the podcast. We enjoyed the conversation, and we
Appreciate you,
are
Will.
out of here, you guys.